Hello?
Hey, it's Brad.
Brad, what's up?
Nothing much. You ready to talk about 12 Monkeys?
I am ready.
Released in 1995, and it starred Brad Pitt, Madeline Stowe, and Bruce Willis. Can you think of any other good people?
No, I can't.
Those are the main characters, huh?
Yeah, those are the main ones.
That's
Christopher Plummer is in it, but he's not really a main character. It did get 88% Rotten Tomato from critics and from users. It got 88%. I read some of the reviews, and for the most part, the reviews were pretty good as far as saying the movie was kind of, maybe the plot was jumbled a little bit or maybe a little out of sorts, but the performances were good.
Did you actually get a chance to watch La Jetée?
I looked for a version with English subtitles, and I couldn't find one, so no, I didn't.
They have an English version on Hulu Plus.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah. I have never been able to sit through the whole thing until like 2 weeks ago when I knew we were going to talk about this. It's pretty cool, I guess. I mean, one big difference between that one and this movie, they actually pass through time through injections. They actually inject the volunteers, as they've been called in 12 Monkeys, to go into history for information. And the relationship he forms with the girl in the short movie in the French version is more romantic. It's much more of like the flaneur, the person walking the streets of Paris pre-apocalypse. And it's 12 Monkeys, there's such a strain on not succumbing to the pleasures of the past, whereas in the short film, it's much more about this kind of leisurely in and out time travel. It's very interesting.
That's a good point, because I did notice that any time that they were either in 1990 or in 1996, that whatever locations they used to film, always very dingy, bad side of town, very run down. So yeah, it's a good point that they didn't bring out all the good things of the past.
In La Jetée, it's a nice juxtaposition where you're seeing past Paris is beautiful and romantic, and then real time, or the time of the story, is kind of horrid. But I was like thinking about this, because when I watch movies from the 90s, mid to beginning 90s, the crime thing seems to be super played up. And, the first landing for Bruce Willis's character in this film is April 1990. And I wanted to think, well, what was going on with the riders? And I reviewed the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which is published by the DOJ. And it seems like violent crime had actually peaked in the United States around 1993, 1994, which is when they were writing this and in pre-production. So I wonder if that has an influence on the way they thought about the world for 12 Monkeys.
I mean, crime itself wasn't necessarily, didn't have a whole lot to do. I mean, there was a few shots here and there, but I think maybe just sort of the griminess of everything in the past leads you to believe that maybe a city like Baltimore, although I think Baltimore in those days was kind of a rough town.
Yeah.
In the early to mid 90s until they.
Well, the crime looks bad. I mean, the crime does look bad when you look at the data. But to me, when I watch a 90s film, it becomes like this cliche, insane asylum and the, crime and all the things that they kind of overplay, it seems like, in those movies from that time.
I think insane asylums, as a general rule, I think is overplayed.
Yeah.
Anytime it's in a movie. I think, it's funny, because I was thinking about this morning, actually, I think 98 and 99% of the public's perception of an insane asylum is probably that, whatever depicted in that movie and any other movie, and it's probably way different than what it is in reality. People running around in robes and stuff. It just seems like every movie is the same thing. Like, everybody's totally and completely nuts and just over medicated. It's really. I mean, it's comical. It's to the point where it's kind of comical now.
Yeah, but that's because we've watched so many movies, and you just see it over and over and over again. The actual rooms that they're sleeping in at the insane asylum in the 1990 extreme Greek ornamentation, the Greek patterns all over the walls, and kind of had a very strict geometric plan for the rooms, especially the rooms that they slept in. And it kind of reminded me of Claude Nicolas Ledoux's. He had a design paradigm for the perfect city in the I think it's late 1700s, which really led to modernist thinking throughout the 19th century. But he actually had designed insane asylums and prisons, which were kind of an early form of that. And he used almost the exact same kind of pattern in his preparation. He wanted to have a guard at the middle of a room, and he wanted all the institutionalized individuals in a circle so that the guard could watch them at all times. And when they actually tried this, supposedly, the actual members of the institution, the ones that are being restrained, like even were more violent and acted out even worse because they felt like they were being watched all the time and didn't feel like they had any solace to themselves. So it really does help you feel like he's always under some kind of psychological control in the film.
I was going to say that the time travel notion, the fact that the past can't be changed no matter what, no matter what he does, whatever happens has already happened. He's just trying to get something that will help them out in the present. That's kind of an interesting way to look at time travel.
Yeah.
It was just sort of touched upon a couple times here and there. I mean, Bruce Willis mentioned it a couple times that he can't really do anything to change the past, and that's not really what his purpose is.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a really interesting point, and that just sort of gets lost in the distraction of, the Army of the 12 Monkeys and Brad Pitt's character, which I don't know if that was the point, but maybe it would have been too confusing to sort of continue to hit upon that issue, and maybe Bruce Willis's his character is not sophisticated enough to get into a discussion on that issue, so maybe it was left alone. But that notion I think is interesting, but they really didn't expand on that at all.
Yeah. I did enjoy, another thing that's not talked about or you don't hear a lot about, but in the 90s, this whole, Madeline Stowe's character, I forgot her name in the movie, but she says, psychology is the new religion, etc. And, and in architectural theory, that was something that was hammered in the 90s. There's this a whole idea of phenomenology, and there's a whole kind of wing of architectural theory, contemporary architecture theory that, is really trying to deal with psychology as a foundation for a new way to build spaces. And then there's a whole other critical wing that says it's complete bogus crap, and we should move back to building spaces that people need to use, so more realistic. And I just thought it was interesting that this is a movie that deals a lot with has architecture as a foundation, even if it's not explicit, and did deal with that as well, talking about psychology as this new religion, this new way of reframing the entire world. And maybe it doesn't work as planned, because, in the, what was it, the 80s, 70s, 80s economic, they used economic supply demand curves for everything. Everything in the world had to fit into an economic system, and then after that, kind of superseding that became the psychology template that everybody pressed upon every issue or concern, and then I think this movie was nice at saying, well, maybe it's bogus as well, and we got to move on. Oh, one thing I thought was fun is that Christopher Maloney was in this movie as a detective. Do you know who he is?
The Law and Order guy?
Yeah.
Special Victims Unit, I think.
Yeah, I looked it up. And, he plays Lieutenant Halperin. I do not even remember him being in that movie until I rewatched it. I mean, he was like nobody. Well, I didn't know him at all. And then after this, he did NYPD, he did Homicide, and he did 3 separate syndicates of Law and Order. I mean, the guy made a career of this detective work afterwards.
Being a police officer, detective. I read that Terry Gilliam gave Bruce Willis quotes, movie cliches, not to say, that he can't say those cliches in the movie, and he can't. He couldn't give the patented Bruce Willis steely, blue-eyed stare. When he squints his eyes, he said that you can't do that in this movie.
What else?
He gave him lines. He gave him lines that he couldn't say. And he gave him a look. He said, "You cannot do that." So I'm sure that there were a lot of quotes, go-to quotes that he had, and he said, "You can't use any of these quotes at all."
I mean,
which I thought was funny. But you can see, like, I was watching the movie, and there's probably aren't a lot of places where you could throw in a one-liner, but there's definitely there's definitely room for him to throw, the cheesy action movie one-liner.
Yeah.
And I think I read a lot of reviews also that said this was, Bruce Willis's best performance, which I'm not sure about, but it may be the only one where it was he didn't play an action hero or an action character or a strong character. He just played a dude that was trying to get a job done and was struggling and needed a lot of help.
And because I remember just the visual impact of the movie was enough to keep me interested, to see the cities falling apart and the animals taking over and the monkeys and the red graffiti. This is it's almost like a Banksy art piece, the actual monkeys on the clock and the accordion playing. I just remember being in a total milieu or environment that it sucked me in when I watched the film over and over again on my Laserdisc player. I loved it.
Yeah, that's probably why I liked it when I first saw it a long time ago. But now when you look at it, it doesn't quite hold up. Maybe production-wise, maybe visually, it doesn't quite hold up. But I found that the story just wasn't that interesting, wasn't that compelling. I mean, Brad Pitt was very good, but even he was a little over the top. But he was very good.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But otherwise, it didn't have a whole lot that I could say something you need to see.
That's something I really liked about it, is that all three of the primary actors, Madeline Stowe, Brad Pitt, and Bruce Willis, took it extremely seriously. I mean, I think, and they did a great job playing the characters as they've been handed. I thought they didn't overact, but they played it straight. I mean, really well. I mean, they did a good job, I felt like.
He did a great job. Madeline Stowe was very good. Bruce Willis was good. So the main characters, you're right, the main characters were really good, but
sometimes I wish that in the 12 Monkeys group, I wish Terry Gilliam had actually reflected on the Weather Underground and real American groups that are less reported. Because I don't know if he was or not, but it doesn't look familiar. It just looks like kind of a one-dimensional terrorist group, not like the ones that actually existed, at least in the 70s and somewhat in the 90s with the World Trade Organization riots in Seattle. Was that? There have been groups in history, and it'd be interesting to have some historic perspective on those through film. Another thing, I remember my brother and I screaming, buy, sell, trade, all the time when we felt over-consumerized, like when we were at Walmart or, Sam's Club with my mom, and we were so sick of it. We would just start screaming at her in the Brad Pitt voice, It was something we kind of really believed, and it kind of it influenced us now, and I'm sure that was kind of a foundational thing. But now when you look at it, you don't even remember that being a big deal, but it kind of was a big deal. The Florida Keys commercial that runs over and over throughout the whole film. I know it's helping you line up the kind of narrative, but it's also reminding you that the 90s were kind of this, consumerist, peak in some way. With we had the Berlin Wall had fallen, and globalization had really taken off. If you remember, I mean, it's pretty interesting.
Plus, in 1990, when he came back the first time, I believe that Miami Vice was, I think it was a top 10 show at the time on TV. And so, Miami itself, it was a real boon for Miami itself. People coming to Florida anyway because of that. So I'm not really surprised that the Florida Keys or Florida in general was
mentioned so much.
As much as it was.
Yeah, and Miami Vice might be
Golden Girls, I think, was popular. Golden Girls in those days, I think, was popular, and they were set in Florida.
Yeah, we got it. We might have to do in season 2. We might have to do a Miami Vice review.
And in fact, last year I went back and I watched every episode of Miami Vice.
Oh, you did?
Back again to watch them all. I did, yeah.
Oh man, yeah. We definitely have to put that on next season. Put that on the list. So did you ever get to read the U.S. District Court opinion, Woods v. Universal City Studios?
No, I didn't read the opinion, but I did read that eventually that they settled for, they paid him a lot of money, high six figures, in order to use the set, and I think on your notes you said that he got a film credit.
A little background is Woods is an architect, and his buddy called him up and said, "Have you seen this movie, 12 Monkeys? If you haven't, come see it right now." They went and saw it. And lo and behold, a movie had been made, and they had, done a complete carbon copy of one of his most commercially successful drawings that he has in his books. And right there on this film, they had basically copied it piece by piece and used it in the film. It's the interrogation room where they have the orb that is kind of looking back at Bruce Willis as he's being asked questions by the scientist and restrained.
So they the scene where he's sitting in that metal chair and he's restrained.
It's three scenes in the movie, and they kind of like question him, and it's almost. I have the book here if you want to look at it next time you're at the house. It's just almost exact copy. Even the way the metal panels are affixed to the wall behind him in a kind of a 4x8 grid, the same in the movie and in the book. In Woods's, I loved the actual work being expressed in full scale in the movie. I mean, you really get to kind of a simulation of what his work would look like if humans were in it.
Yeah, so no matter how bad this movie might be, then you're always going to have something positive to say.
I'll start by saying for the Riyazi star system, I actually, for the cinematic rating, I would give it a 1 star. Of the movies that Terry Gilliam has made, this is one of the most watchable ones for a typical person or for someone that isn't a huge cinephile. I think.
I think I would give it 0, only because the performances are really good, but not enough for me at least. Because I think you can see those actors doing better in different things. And I think the story itself is not compelling enough. There's a lot of interesting points, but I don't think any of them were developed, and I think some of them fell flat for me. So I would say 0. I think you can see Willis and Pitt and Stowe and a bunch of other different things that are much better.
Okay, cool. So 0 stars for the cinematic. What do you think about the architectural? What's your architectural rating from your perspective?
I would say 0 too, because there wasn't much in it other than a lot of the old buildings at the beginning of the movie in the snow, and then towards the end when he was seeing himself or realizing that these are the same buildings he saw when he was above ground. But everything was really dingy. So the present, well, I shouldn't say the present, the 1990 and 96 parts of the movie are all sort of in bad parts of town. So there's not much to look at. And underground, I guess maybe the underground portions could have been a little more fully developed so we could really see what life is like, so you could have a little more emotional investment in what Bruce Willis was trying to do. But it wasn't. So I don't know. There wasn't a whole lot of. But all in all, I would say 0 for architecture myself.
The one major thing that's so awesome about this movie is you actually get to see Wood's work, even if it's simulated in cinema. You actually get to see it for once, and it's a human scale with humans working with it, and that's such a rarity. He already died. He died in the
Hurricane Sandy?
Yeah, he died during the Hurricane Sandy, and so he only really had one major project that was built in China, and then he has a couple of artsy projects in Europe. But for those hardcore fans of his work, like myself, a lot of the best work is like the work that was shown in this movie. The interrogation room is a real famous one. It was supposed to express this otherness, this like place for new technology, and he was always questioning whether the technology is going to kind of look back at you or you're going to look at it, or how the relationships are going to change over time. And even though 12 Monkeys is a real negative expression of that, it still builds this kind of dialogue of where does technology take us and what is it doing to us in general. It's a unique opportunity that you don't get in very many movies. Long story short, this is one of the only opportunities you get to see Woods' actual work in a 3D sense. I give it 2 stars just for that. They stole the material. They did a good job stealing it, so it looks good, and it looks like you'd expect it to be. I mean, I think that's awesome. I mean, and yeah, he got paid in the end, but I mean, it's just so fitting because Woods has always questioned the political power of architecture, and he's a big critic of globalization as just the de facto way things are going to be. He feels that we should be much more careful and questioning. I don't know. That makes me feel better, or not feel better, but it makes me want to promote it more as something you should see before you put it away.
Yeah, I would agree with that.